You who know Andrew know that he is passionate about helping the world through the technology of smokeless stoves. And each time he speaks to us about this, I think he lifts our view of the bigness of the world and the capacity that every one of us has to contribute something significant by doing something very reasonable, even taking a small step in the right direction. The title of his speech is No Room in the Ark. The speech is 6 to 8 minutes long. This is his 10th speech from his Competent Communicator Manual, so that deserves a shout out. Looking forward to what you have to talk to us about today.
Well, as you know, I've been talking a lot about smokeless stoves, and in my searching for topics and ideas and information, I have come across so much information I thought I'd try to summarize it. So the title of my speech today is There's No Room in the Ark. The Ark was God's symbol of salvation. He was going to try to save us, but we ignored his offer. God waited 120 years, and still we didn't respond. Well, in our crisis today, we might be in the same place. We've known that the world is very dangerous because of all the pollution that's going on. Are we ignoring the problem to our peril? Like the door on the ark, will the opportunity be closed and we not be able to fix, save, protect the planet that we live on? There's a professor, Stephen Emmett, who heads the science laboratory at Oxford, and he's estimated that by the year 2100, there will be 10 billion people on the planet. There are already 7. It used to take centuries for the population to increase that quickly. Now it just takes a few decades, and the more people you get, the less time it takes. But he says, it's obvious that population growth and climate change will plunge the Earth into an unprecedented planetary emergence. He warns of a world that is a living hell, where we are at war over water, food, and fuel. Kevin Costner in the movie Waterworld was living in a flooded world on a small craft that he could skim over this ocean, but people were always trying to take his food, his water, and his fuel. So you know that we have a problem. We have to decide whether or not we're going to address it reasonably and rationally. Last year alone, all the nations of the world pumped in 38 billion tons of carbon dioxide. The United States and Germany were the only 2 countries in the world to reduce emissions. The US by 2% and Germany by 4%. But we're still one of the 3 leading offenders of pumping carbon dioxide into the air, along with India and China. India and China together increased their production of carbon dioxide by 17%. So cutting out 6 only to be increased by 17 doesn't really help us a lot. So what are we going to do? There's a fellow who's doing the research, and he says that the idea of slowing the rate of emission in the world, because we haven't really gotten a plan, is not a very optimistic idea, that we can have these protocols and these conferences and really solve the problem. So what are we going to do? There are droughts and floods happening everywhere in the world. Russia in 2010 had the worst drought that they had in 50 years, and it caused them to lose 40% of their grain production. So Russia says we're going to restrict the export of grain. But the problem is, India and Pakistan then had riots because there was a food shortage. Russia is a major supplier of those 2 countries, in particular grains. We had a drought this year, the worst drought since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. But fortunately, we have some grain reserves. So it didn't affect us as bad. But what if this is not a 1-year event, that this is an ongoing occurrence? We're in a cycle of drought. What will we do then? The Mississippi, the mighty Mississippi, is at the lowest level in decades. It's really affecting commerce along the river because the river is so low. Is this the new norm for our country? where we're struggling with food and water, we're competing for water to produce food, and there's going to be conflict within our own country. Well, this Professor Emmett was very pessimistic about our ability to technologize our way out of it, or the increase in food production, or finding a way to make water clean and abundant, or the way to have cheap renewable energy. This is not a new problem. There's a guy named Paul Ehrlich who wrote a book in the 60s called The Population Bomb. And in it, he was warning about the peril of unregulated population growth. He suggested that we have a negative population growth or a one-child policy. Fortunately, all of his predictions have not come true. In fact, he predicted that India would not be able to feed itself. But the Green Revolution came along, and now India is a food exporter. So who do we believe? We have the optimist and we have the pessimist, the naysayers and the people who think everything will be wonderful, we'll work it out. Well, there's another author with a book, Hurtling Towards Oblivion. It states that the power of progress results in more and more of everything, faster and faster. What he's really stating is that we are now in the era of exponential growth. Things don't go gradually up. He made some charts where he plotted all the information. And in the 1980s, the charts all turn and make this sharp turn and go almost straight up. The change is exponential. What happened in the 80s? Wasn't that when computers came into existence and information could be faster and we could learn faster because we had more information available to us? Well, what if all these things, all this change, we can't control it? Every time there's a lot of progress, there's also the opportunity to do a lot of destruction. Just because we can increase the speed of a computer, we can have a virus that shuts it down. We can increase animal production, but a disease can come along and wipe out a herd or a flock. We can improve food production, drought, disease, and rodents can limit our production of food. You've heard me talk about stoves. They're safe, they're clean, and they're efficient. However, stoves are not going to be the major world-changing idea. As much as I like stoves, it's not that big of an idea. There was a group of people that met in Copenhagen, experts from around the world. They looked at 30 different ideas. The idea that I've been thinking was I could change with stoves was global warming. That idea was the last one on their list of all the ideas they looked at. They said that sending micronutrients, vitamin A and zinc, to 80% of the developing world, the children in the developing world, would do the most good to give children the chance to grow up strong and healthy. The other idea they came up with is if we could reduce trade barriers, that the market would work out the most efficient distribution of resources. If we could reduce those barriers, we could have this increasing economy. So here's the deal. The art we need to build is cooperation. And the way we're going to do that is if we work together. But are we going to work together? You see, we live in very interesting times. Mr. Toastmaster.